All right, hello everyone, and welcome back. As promised, here's the follow-up review of Black Armoury's Fetter number 1. This is their light flex version. I'll post all the specs of this weapon somewhere here on the video. I don't want to get too deep into the specs because I really just want to talk about the weapon itself, its good points, its bad points, its quality, etc. So the one spec I will talk about is the weight of this weapon because it means so much to the good and the bad of this weapon. So as people who use the standard Regulier or other fetters in general, they'll weigh somewhere around 3 to 3.5 pounds, which will be at somewhere around 1,300 to 1,300 to about 1,380 grams. This one is 1,250 grams and or right around 2.8 pounds, meaning it's very light. So the positive things I have about this weapon are due to the fact that it is so light. It is very nimble. It turns very well in the air. They've balanced it enough where they've taken a lot of weight out here, even in this section of the sword, which has made it, and as you can see here, they stop the fuller about there, which has made this area of the sword very light, which makes it rotate very well in your hand and in the air. It also makes, when you're cutting and then transitioning to, let's say, finding their sword and then delivering a thrust, this sword is very, very agile for those types of techniques. It's also great for practice because it's light. It's easy on your wrists. It's easy on your arms. It's easy on your shoulders. It's really good to practice new techniques on that you might not have down. Maybe the general motion and the sword path. This sword is very forgiving for that sort of thing. So that's probably one of the stronger points if you're looking for a lighter sword. General quality of the sword, as I mentioned, I've used it quite extensively now against all sorts of weapons. Heavier and much robust blade, like the thickness of the blade of the Regulier, or I've used it against full-out long swords, and this is held up against everything. The blade itself has a few nicks and dings in it, nothing any more severe than you would get on any other sword, if that made sense. It's taken the same sort of damage that my Regulier has taken. And fit and finish wise, the pommel, perfectly fine. The handle's fine. Even this little piece they've put in here is fine. And the crossguard is fine. It's got some typical dents in it and dings. Now you'll notice there's a rattle on this. That's not due to a loose crossguard. The crossguard is actually, through a whole bunch of sparring, has actually stayed in place, which was surprising to me. We'll talk about that in a second. What has come loose are these little safety knobs that they put on the end. They're kind of just peened on here by the looks of it, just through force. I don't think they've tack welded them on. And this one has come loose. This one is fine. So that's what the rattling is. So if there's one quality problem that this had, that would be it, and that's very minor, which says a lot about the craftsmanship of this weapon. The one weak area, or let's just say corner cutting area of this weapon, is they stuck in shims. I don't know if you'll be able to see it here, but you'll see plastic shims in order to keep the crossguard solid. Now, it's worked, so it's a good solution. It's kept the crossguard solid, and you can't really complain about that. But it does go to say a little bit about the initial craftsmanship, that they need to put shims in order to keep this solid, but it works, and I think just by the way they've done it there, it's going to continue to work for a long period of time. So I guess if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Outside of that, the blade itself, as I've mentioned, is very, very flexible. Now, it's not so flexible that when you're cutting or just generally, let's say, practicing or doing general sword work, it doesn't flex in the air while you swing it. It will only flex in the air if you have your blade flat, and it will wobble, right? But if you're actually cutting and you have good cutting mechanics, which is the key, this weapon will not wobble in the air. One of the downsides I found to using this weapon, I'm not sure if it's to do with the weight of the weapon or the flex of the blade. Now there are two versions of this you can order. You can do the light flex or the stiff. When I ordered it, they changed their ordering. They've changed their manufacturing process, I believe, and the type of blades they have are slightly different from when I originally ordered it. So right before they shipped, they asked me again what type of blade I wanted, and I guess they had a really light flex, a medium, and a stiff. I said, well, give me the medium one. So this, I think, is the medium one. Now, I've gone to their website again. They haven't updated anything from when I've ordered it, so I don't know what that really means. All I know is this one's very flexible, and due to that, I found when I would find other people's swords, even down to a Regine, which we all know is a pretty stiff fetter, I found if I wasn't perfect, people could dominate my sword and, use their stiffer sword as an advantage in certain binds and in certain situations. Now, it has forced me to be a little bit more perfect, or let's just say find a little bit better with my sword and cut a little bit better with my sword. I've been used to using long swords and my Regine to sort of bully my way through certain people's swords. I actually can't do that with this sword anymore. So when I cut, I can't rely on the fact I may be able to shed their sword aside, or cast, I should say, their sword aside. I have to rely on the fact that proper mechanics is going to cast their sword aside, not just a stiff, heavily weighted sword. So that can be a benefit for a person who's training. But when I found in heavy sparring, I ran into a few areas where I found myself a little disadvantaged against particularly other long swords. Now, with that being said, one other strange problem I found with this weapon was sometimes it's so light and it has so much flex, sometimes I would hit people and they would actually tell me I hit them and I wouldn't know. So wearing through my big gloves, I would hit people on the head, on the soft part of their mask, and they would say hit, and I'd be like, oh. And it would be generally the tip that would hit, and sometimes I wouldn't really notice it. I might have noticed a little bit, but to me it felt like a graze or something, but it was a clear hit. So I'd have people telling me I hit them and I wouldn't know. Also, sometimes on a thrust, because it has so much flex, I wasn't quite sure whether I had just tapped them or, landed a very large thrust on them, of which they would tell me, no, that was a good thrust. That could be just me. Some other people might be a little bit more sensitive. But nevertheless, what that does provide is a lot of safety for who you're sparring with. I have great confidence when using this weapon that I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to injure a person with this the way I could with my Regine, particularly on a thrust. This has so much flex. I actually don't have too much fear in thrusting people with this weapon anymore that I might over thrust or hit them in an area where they don't have enough padding. Same thing with the cut with this weapon. Because it's so light and the way they've designed the sword, it lands and it hits a lot softer. So a hit to the hands, it's still going to hurt with this weapon if you hit a person on the fingers, but much less so than a longsword style weapon or even the heavier Regine with the slightly thicker blade. So to really conclude about this weapon, after I'd say many hours of heavy sparring and loss of practice, it's held up better than expected. I bought this on a whim. I'd never seen anyone with it. There's no reviews online. I was looking for a light fetter. I wanted to try a light fetter, so I ordered it on a whim. And so far I'm happy with it for what it is, a light sparring fetter. And If I could do it again, I think I would order the stiff. It's very tough for me to judge that because I don't have a stiff to pair, to pair it against, and I don't know if I'm going to order another one in good time to properly judge that. But I would really like to somehow get my hands on a stiff version of this to judge whether the little issues I mentioned earlier in the video about finding and the flex of the sword, of whether that has to do with the flexibility or the weight of the weapon. It's probably a combination of both, but in order to properly judge that, I would need a stiff version of this weapon in order to try it out. So overall, I'm happy with this weapon. I can, right now, after a little over a month of using it and lots of sparring, I can recommend this weapon. I actually highly recommend this weapon for practice and for light sparring to heavy sparring against friends and opponents. Just because it's so flexible and it is so nice on your opponent. I would say for those purposes, this is an ideal weapon. For a tournament, for going up against opponents that might have heavier weapons, that's where this might falter a little bit, and that goes back to maybe I need to try the stiffer version. So thanks for watching this video, and I hope you liked it. Once again, I can recommend purchasing this. I think for the price, I think for, at the time, 215 pounds. I think it's listed at 259 pounds. That's actually not bad for a weapon that has held up and taken quite a beating. So thanks. Have a good evening, and enjoy your day or evening.